Hey guys, welcome back to the Daily People Podcast, the show that is made great by great guests. Today I've got a great friend of mine. His name is Ken Turner. Today I have on one of my long-term friends. This is really challenging.
Hey, should you call him your long-term friend?
I'll call him my old boss.
You can call him your friend, but also call him your old boss.
Today I have on Ken Turner, who is a former boss of mine and now a great friend. He considers himself to be one of my other dads. Here we go. Excuse me. Please forgive me, as I don't really like asking for help. But do you know what would make a good intro? Just kidding. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Daily People Podcast, where we talk about achievements, have fun, and each guest is certified as awesome. I'm your host, John Mark Spear. Let's go. Ken Turner, welcome to the Daily People Podcast. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Glad to talk to you.
So Ken Turner is one of my lifelong heroes, a former employer of mine. And tell us a little bit about who you are in your life.
Born in West Texas, grew up, moved to East Texas, graduated from high school in Atlanta, Texas. I was valedictorian. Woo! I went to Baylor University, got a BBA in accounting, and decided to launch into my career as an accountant. Spent 2 years in Dallas as an accountant, and then followed that up with 7 years as a public accountant in East Texas. Got a job working for a law firm, went over and helped them with their books, setting them up. And at the end of the 3 months of setting those books up, I became the only person that understood them. And so they had to hire me. So I created a job, and I stayed in that job for the last 30 years. In the last 13 years, I've been working the CPA job part-time, and I started a ground-up hardware store, which was something completely outside of my range of experience. But I started that hardware store, and it's become what I think is a successful hardware store. And I'm nearing the end of my professional career at this point, and have had a life full of experiences. I laugh and tell everybody, the age of 50, I decided what I wanted to do when I grew up, and it was sell hammers and nails. So
Hell of a midlife crisis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Some people just go buy a car. I started up a hardware store. It might have been cheaper to go buy a car.
Yeah. Tell me why you just went through the whole spill of, I was valedictorian in high school, went to Baylor, got my BBE, then I went, back to Dallas for a couple years. And tell me why you work in the accounting field for so long, and then have the life switch, like the life change or the change of mentality to want to do a hardware store.
I was always strong in math and looked for something to do with math in school. And I grew up in the newspaper business because that's what my dad did, was run newspapers. And so I wrote for him and took pictures and all that kind of stuff. And all I knew is I wanted to do anything but journalism. And so I went to school, tried to figure out, decided you couldn't major in math because ultimately then you end up being a math teacher, and you may be totally fulfilled in life, but you won't be properly compensated. And so I decided that I wanted to be an accountant because that was as close to doing something with math as I could ever get. And so became a public accountant, started off doing audits. They describe as an auditor is somebody who comes in after the war and stabs all the wounded. It was not for me. I didn't particularly like audit. Decided that what I really wanted to do was to go over to the tax world moved out to East Texas and really started. It was way more fulfilling to me to have individual contact with people and to be able to do individuals' tax returns, and went to work for the law firm. And I saw the work that they were doing at the law firm. It was a personal injury law firm. Saw the work they were doing and really helping people at a point in their life when they needed help.
And how old were you at this point?
It was in 88, 89. So I'm 32 or 3 years old, 30, okay. 31.
So they're helping people.
So they're helping people. And I really started looking for what my triggers were because I had a sense that I needed to do something more to help people. Worked in the law firm, for what everybody on earth thinks is the profession that's just slightly above used car salesmen is lawyers. Mm-hmm. And I really got to see some lawyers who really cared about people that were less fortunate, and wanted to do some of that. But I had something in the back of me, a creative side, wanted to do something. And so my wife, Susie, and I decided that what we really wanted to do was maybe remodel a few houses and work at that. So our first foray into that was we bought a condemned house.
Oh, there you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's not the way that I would advise anybody to start, was with a condemned house.
You mean to tell me it wasn't fresh drywall and nice paint and all the things that you look for in a new house?
In fact, when we walked in, I think Susie was wearing some sort of white pants at the time, and we looked down, and from her ankles to her knees had turned brown from all the fleas that were inside the house.
Oh, gross.
And the ceiling was kind of caving in one spot, and it was a pier and beam house. And we hired a handyman to really help us. Mm-hmm. But more than that, I went to him and said, I know nothing about this. I'm going to be paying you for your work, but I want to go to school too. And I want you to have me do as much of this stuff as you can, because I want to learn how to do everything there is.
Absolutely.
So he had me climb under the house with the spiders and snakes. He had me climb in the attic in the middle of August and, run a support beam across there. And, times when it was so hot, you had to come down every 10 or 15 minutes and drink a gallon of water. And he really taught me a lot. And so we renovated 8 or 10 houses, and Susie became a home builder. And we laughingly say that we used to go on dates, and we would go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and that's where we went for dates. And we moved our children as they got older and got into a different level of school. We decided we wanted to change their school district in the city of Longview, so we moved to a different side of town. Well, there was no hardware store on that side of town. There was no retail at all. Mm-hmm. And we looked at each other and went, God, man, this side of town needs a local hardware store.
How many times have you heard the saying, man, I love this hardware store here?
Oh, it happens. We've been open for 13 years, and I hear every day how much our customers love us. I see every day how much our customers love us. Our number one product is convenience. The number two product is we help customers. And so we decided to start that hardware store. I was really, really worried because I'd never been in any kind of retail environment. Very worried about, I'm an accountant. That means I have no imagination. That means I have no personality. And you can't make it in sales of any kind if you have no imagination or personality. And so I had to really step outside of my comfort zone with this hardware store and start speaking to people. And I found out that people don't bite your head off. People are very interesting. And I consider it one of the great changes of my life, because it really helped me feel like for the first time in my life, I was helping people.
Mm-hmm.
I said something to Susie one day about that. She goes, Ken, you know, you've been helping people with their taxes for years and years and years. And I said, yeah, but you know, there's something about when their toilet is stopped up and you get it to where it's flowing, they love you.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really appreciate it. And if you get them an extra $10 back on a refund, yeah, they like you. But I mean, it's just money. They get to go buy another bag of potato chips. But if you help them unstop a sink because it's Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and they need somebody that we can't have this happen, or if you help them, no, that's not the way you need to fix this. You need to fix this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a small town, and I really wanted the Mayberry, Opie, and Andy, and all that kind of experience to really carry over into our hardware store. And so
Can I tell you that I don't know who Mayberry, Opie, and Andy are? Would
do
you?
what?
I don't know who Mayberry, Opie, and Andy are.
Seriously?
I'm serious.
Griffith?
Okay.
Andy Griffith? The Andy Griffith Show?
Okay.
Now we're telling our age difference. It used to be your shame on your parents for not raising you right and showing you Andy Griffith shows growing up, because there's so much moral lessons that can be learned from that show.
Yeah.
That's the kind of environment we wanted to create. A small hometown feel. And so we greet all our customers by name. Most of them, we greet everybody when they come in the store.
Mm-hmm.
The most often complaint that we hear, or the complaint that we hear most often, is somebody has asked me if I needed help like 6 times, and would y'all just leave me alone and let me go around and look?
Mm-hmm.
We have to explain to them, well, that's kind of the boss's big deal. He really wants us to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
My theory is that people can get ignored at Lowe's.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to come here if we ignore them. And what's happened is I've become really close friends with over half of my customers, and they treat the hardware store as if it's their hardware store, because this is their community store. The community has supported us. It's kind of a throwback business. People don't do service with sales anymore. They just, we've all gone to a Sam's society where you bag it yourself and you carry it out yourself, and you can't ask anybody questions. And that's not the experience that I was going for. And I think mom and pop stores are kind of making a comeback now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were going for. And it turned out, I think we helped the community. I think we changed the nature of business in the community. I think we've attracted other businesses because we've been successful. But probably the biggest change of all that has been to me. I can talk to anybody about anything. And I used to, if I walked into a room with 100 people, I'd be the only one standing in a corner not talking to anybody. And now Susie goes, Ken, I can't get you to shut up. You talk to everybody. I flirt with every girl that comes in. I don't care if they're an 80-year-old lady. I tell them how good looking they are and what can I do to help them? What can I do to make them smile today?
Yeah. And
it's been more rewarding for me. And I never saw that coming, but it's been very rewarding for me.
Man, I have just being a former employee of your store, and you and I, we still talk probably every 3 or 4 weeks, if not more frequently than that. And you can talk about just about anything that you've seen. One thing that you were saying kind of in the middle of your spill was that mom and pop stores you think are making a comeback. What tells you that? And have you seen anything during the coronavirus that has given you that belief?
We were considered an essential store during coronavirus, so we stayed open. We cut
what did it take to be essential? The true essential.
it was very interesting to me because there are a lot of arguments, political arguments out there about what's essential and what isn't. The Supreme Court just ruled that New York couldn't limit religious gatherings. At the same time, they were not limiting wine stores because somehow wine and those stores could carry on business as usual. But
you got to access the spirits, Ken.
That's right. It was a different kind of spirit access. I don't know how they came up with essential. We were considered essential primarily because if your plumbing breaks at your house, our society is such that if you try to live without electricity or try to live without a commode, most people would find it impossible. And so we were considered essential.
Well, most people also don't want to dig a hole in their backyard every time they need to use the restroom. So,
right.
Yeah. I can see where we would be essential as a hardware store.
One of the things that I saw was that the whole government intervention deal to partially shut down, wear masks, not wear masks, and all that. My customers came down on both sides of that fence, and we don't take political stances at the hardware store. I can talk with anybody about anything, but one of the things I felt like was that our customer base really rallied around us. We actually saw a pretty good increase in business because of COVID, because I think people really appreciated the fact that you can get pretty much everything you need in a small environment. It felt safer to them because they weren't in a 75,000 square foot building. They're not in there with 300 customers. You can get in my store and out of my store in 2 minutes if you want to. Susan and I have had a long discussion, my wife Susie and I have had a long discussion about how come we've been so fortunate through the whole COVID that I've had basically one employee really come down with COVID, and we're with the public every day. How does that happen? And we both attribute that to the length of interaction between us and any one individual is usually 2 or 3 minutes. And so there's a huge turnover of the customers every day.
And that's from a service side. That's not from a get the heck out of here side.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can come in and spend 30 minutes. If you get me wound up over something, you can come in and I can talk to you for 30 minutes about anything. Look at this podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a long way from being the quiet CPA that I was. And I think I think it's very interesting that God leads us in places that we don't see necessarily at the time. Him leading us, and it has led me to become what I feel like is a more well-rounded person. I have a lot of empathy for people. Again, a lot of that is because I've gotten to know so many of my customers, and they've become friends, and I think there's a general feeling that mom and pops are sort of the backbone of society. A few years ago, we had the whole farm aid stuff with Willie, and, we were worried about losing the family farms. And I think that people really they don't want society to be taken over by big corporations. Obviously, they have their place, and they're going to make their money. Yeah. They're all going to get rich, but there has to be a place for the guy out there to run a business that cares about his customers. And I'm not saying that he can't make money. Yeah. I'm just saying that if his main driving force is making money and not necessarily helping his customers, I think people appreciate that and can sense when they walk into a store that this is a different kind of place. They really care about their customers.
Yeah, we actually had to. We stopped using like any big box we could. I mean, outside of Kroger for groceries, and maybe the small trip to Home Depot. We don't use them. We don't have an Amazon account. We don't have anything. And that's just how our house runs. We'd like to go see the mom and pops. We like to go to we don't do chain restaurants. none of that stuff, because we have found that during these times, the ones that are really trying to survive are the ones like you guys who are giving to the community all the time, all the time, all the time. And, you know, it's really, especially in the restaurant business, it's almost like it's your time to receive some from all those people that you've been giving out to and stuff. So I've really found that being away from those big boxes has helped the customer service experience that I see in places similar to yours. You had talked a bit on the law firm and how some of those guys were just great guys. Who was, did you have any one person that was just a big influence on you that really kind of like took you under and said, Ken, this is like the way of the world. If you kind of walk this path, you'll be a bit more happy.
Yeah. When I went to work over there, the lead attorney was a guy by the name of Franklin Jones Jr. And he was, former state bar president. He had dined with presidents before. He had dined with governors. People running for state office would come through our office and, to try to get his support. And I always remembered how humble that he appeared. He would tell a candidate coming through our office, who wanted his support, I'll be for you or against you, whichever way you think it'd help the most. And, he just never took anything for granted. He and I became extremely close. Ultimately, he passed on, but he named me as the power of attorney over his medical deal and trusted me with anything and everything in his life. And he became a surrogate father for me that I could go to with anything. And don't get me wrong, I have an incredibly fantastic father that I'm still have good close relationship with. But Franklin was just one of those guys. He had a story for everything. He had an incredible memory, would stand by you no matter whether you had screwed up or whatever, would love you. But he never wanted to let you know that. He, all those years, he would introduce me as the moth hole of the fabric of his existence.
Is that a compliment?
It really wasn't. But he loved me. For instance, his daughter.
Yeah.
Franklin was incredibly UT oriented. Everything in his life was University of Texas this. He went to UT Law School. And so he raises a daughter, and the first thing she wants to go is to A&M, of course. Kids do exactly what you don't want them to do. And he would go around and tell everybody that she was a piano player at a whorehouse because it sounded so much better to all his friends than she went to A&M. And that was the kind of guy he was. And he would, if I needed something, here's a guy that was wealthy. And if I needed something, he would come to me in the middle of the night and help me out. And I just saw a guy for whom money didn't change who they were. He really cared about people. When he died, he had loaned out so much money to everybody. And he would always tell me, and I would go to him, they're not going to pay you back, Franklin. Why in the world would you loan them this money? And he goes, first off, if they don't pay me back, then I won't ever have to loan them any more money. But they need it worse than I do. They really needed it. And, I just became in my words, a real man. We live in a society where real men don't cry. I don't agree with that. Real men don't eat quiche. I don't agree with that. Real men don't do this. Real men don't do that. And yet our wives love us for all those things that quote unquote real men don't do. And I became very much aware of what was important and what wasn't.
Yeah. It's all that's through Franklin, He sounds like he's incredible. I wish I would have got the opportunity to meet him, but you can see based off what you said, there's a lot of those characteristics that you carry on to. Because I've seen you, give people money. Oh, don't worry about it. I've seen you, have somebody come in, hardware store, exchange some stuff. Ah, don't worry about it. Here you go, or, the times that you come over and help my parents work on their house or, any other thing. Or, I had a lawn service growing up. You let me mow your yard when you could have mowed your yard, but you just, heck, John Mark wants to mow my yard. John Mark can mow my yard.
Yeah, you needed the money. You look like a kid in need.
Back then I was skinny, and that has changed a little bit.
Yeah, well, you did grow up a little.
I couldn't afford food back in the day, so I just.
One of the interesting things to me as an employer for 13 years in the hardware business is how many of the kids that we've had that I still have ongoing relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
An engineer in Dallas, and I've got a computer guy in Houston, and they all call me periodically to just check in and touch base. And I have a whole round of surrogate children that I can be proud of, that I didn't raise, that other people raised, but that all have something that they want to tell me about, or they want to be a connection and have relationships. And that's been something I never thought about.
I'm sure that's something that you're really pretty proud of too.
It is. So, I mean, even the ones that went to University of Arkansas,
So he's only saying that because his son and I were roommates at the University of Arkansas. We played Quidditch together and did all the weird things that we did in college, but you can still be proud of us being a Baylor fan for going to the University of Arkansas.
That's right.
They let you graduate up there still.
And I was shocked. Y'all went to the University of Arkansas and actually came out with all your teeth and came out with education and a degree, and y'all can spell cat. It was actually a pretty good education.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. So tell us a little bit about your kids. I don't think we've heard much about them.
Have two. Have a daughter. She's adopted. We adopted her almost 8 months after we got married. There was a girl that was pregnant in Waco, Texas, and needed somebody to take her child from her. And we continue to have a little bit of a relationship with her over the years. And my daughter's name is Maggie. She is an RN at a local hospital. Maggie's one of those people that always wore black, did the whole craziness thing in high school. She didn't have any close friends, and everybody was worried about her. She goes off to college. She went to Northwestern in Louisiana and became a nurse, and she got into nursing school the first try, passed the nursing test the first try, bought a car right out of college and has that paid off, has bought a house, and it'll be paid off in about 10 years. And she has become, is now a charge nurse and is running a bunch of other nurses under her, and just is an incredibly caring, one of the funniest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I went to school with Ellen DeGeneres, so I can say that,
Did you really?
Funny, and it means something.
Did.
Do what?
You went to school with Ellen DeGeneres.
I did. Graduated with her. She graduated with me.
When? Where?
Atlanta, Texas, 1976. You can go on to her show and look at her. We did our 30th reunion. It was on her show, and she flew all of us out to Los Angeles to be on her show with her for the 30th high school reunion. So you didn't know that, I guess.
I'm going to have to do research on that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
My son, Will, despite his poor choices of roommates in college.
Obviously.
Yeah. Got out and has a computer engineering degree and works for a company named Bottle Rocket that do really high-end iPhone applications. I told Will one day, I said, well, maybe Hometown Hardware needs an iPhone application. He goes, Dad, you can't afford it. So, well, what are you talking about? These are $1 million and $2 million iPhone apps. And I said, you're exactly right. I can't afford that.
Yeah.
But they do them for Southwest Airlines and Chick-fil-A and
Yeah.
a lot of the big giant companies. And he is the classic computer nerd.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I always thought that I would never really meet anybody that was better at math than me.
Mm-hmm.
And Will is just incredible. When he
Yeah.
was 8 years old going to school, he would look up at the front and see the temperature on the gauge, the outside temperature on the gauge, and he'd say, "Dad, let's convert that from Fahrenheit to Celsius." And as an 8-year-old, and so he would convert it, and then we would hit the little switch to see how close he would get. And I've told people that over the years, and that became our little game on the way to school every day to convert 9/5 minus 32 degrees and all of this kind of stuff. And he would convert all that in his head, and they would go, that's just torture for a kid. And I'm like, what, are you kidding me? He loved it. Yeah. Absolutely ate up. And he's still that way about math. He just absolutely loves math and can talk to you ad nauseum about something called the Fibonacci sequence. And I'm like, what?
That's a mouthful.
But he's doing an incredible, mostly to my wife's good parenting skills. We were able to raise 2 really quality kids.
Yeah. What advice would you have going back to raising 2 awesome kids? And you had talked a little bit about how Maggie was adopted. What advice would you have for anybody who is thinking about adopting?
Absolutely the best thing on earth. It worked out incredibly well for us. It was a open adoption. We didn't go through an adoption agency. It was a mm-hmm. private adoption. Mm-hmm. I was scared at the time because I kept thinking, the girl was going to back out and all we were going to do is pay the hospital bills and she was going to go off laughing. But I heard somebody the other day to a family member say to another family member, "You're adopted, so you'll never be real blood." And my blood just boiled. And I got up, and it doesn't happen a lot with me where I get up in somebody's face and go, "Wait a dang second. You're going to tell me that the daughter that I raised 30 years ago, my wife raised 30 years ago, and we changed her diapers and we, got spit up all over and all the things that young parents do, mm-hmm. all the sleepless nights when she was a teenager and all of the joys and whatever, that doesn't make us real parents, and she's blood." She's not biological, but she's absolutely blood, and is my firstborn. And it is a huge thing to me. Now, that doesn't get past the idea that every time she asks me for something and I say, "No, I can't do that right now," she'll come back and go, "It's because I'm adopted, right?" and it's our private joke. Something happened at the hospital one day, and the head maintenance guy said, "No, we can't do that right now." And she goes, "It's because I'm adopted, right?" He's like, "What?"
He's not in on the joke.
Yeah. So, but she's good with it. She knew all along. In fact, she has a half sister, same mother, different father, of hers, that called her one day, and the little girl had gotten pregnant and asked Maggie, "Do you think Mom did the right thing by adopting you out?" And Maggie said, "Absolutely, 100%. It changed my life forever. And, it's been a good experience, I think, for her." Mm-hmm. She will tell you that she's Daddy's girl.
Yeah.
And I give her a hard time. She gives me a hard time. But, I do that with everybody I love, even those that went to Arkansas.
Yeah. My wife's got a sibling that lives near us that they're foster parents. So they've got a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And the most incredible parents I've ever met in my life. Their foster is a teenager, real tough, situation. And I can see the need for what you guys have done in adopting, and I can also see the need for fostering as well. It has been a complete heart change that I've had over the course of watching your life and specifically watching what they're doing right now, because this girl would still be in a bad situation if she wasn't getting help. She's been through 20 different foster homes, 21, I think she's on, and she's nearing adoption. And, you know, praise the Lord, she's getting adopted. But I truly look up to you for adopting and being as firm as you are. And yes, she is my daughter. Yes, she is my blood. Like, we raised her, all the things that you go you.
Yeah. My hat's off to people who foster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can love someone that much and then let them go. And there's a huge need for people to step into the breach, so to speak, and take those kids that are in a bad situation. Almost always none of their own doing. It's because their parents did something. And to be able to pick them up and show them love, I think, is a life-changing message. Yeah. And I know several adopted kids as adults, and all of them say to me, best thing that ever happened to me, you know, they're my parents. I always tell my daughter, you know, you're my favorite daughter, and she'll look up and go, Dad, I'm your only daughter. And I say, yeah, but you're still my favorite. Yeah. And she'll tell me, you know, Dad, you're my favorite dad. And supposedly I have two. So she says she's ahead of me on that department.
She's got you beat. You know, it's interesting that the fostering side of this deal is a very interesting deal. It's like you said, it's, you know, you love and let go, but you don't forget is the other part of it. Right. You know, like in this situation that I'm talking about with my foster niece, we know we've met the future parents, and the relationship between the current foster parents and the future parents is very strong already. So we'll still be able to have that relationship, which is where I really value and appreciate my brother-in-law and sister-in-law for fostering to begin with, but also being able to let go and continue that relationship.
And I guess probably closest thing I know to come to that is when you have kids come to work for you and you maintain a relationship after they leave your employ. Yeah. Present company included in that. You know, I have called all of you boys and girls, because we've had both boys and girls work for us, my surrogate children. And, you know, I've been known to get on to you. I've been known to hug you. I've been known to celebrate in your all of your triumphs, cry at your disappointments, you know, and I don't have any problem at all with that, but yet the foster children deal I have a problem with. Well, I'm not sure there's a huge amount of difference other than I could at some point send you home to your parents.
True. You know, it's like you were saying, you know, you have you know, anything that's happened in my life, been at my wedding, blah blah blah, you'd get on to me whenever I came into the store. I remember coming in one day while I was working for you, and I had smarted off to a teacher, and I was really proud of my comment, and I told you what it was that I had said, and you were disappointed, and you made sure that every customer we had that afternoon for 5.5 hours knew what I had done.
Some might call that abuse.
Well, I learned a lesson from it, though. So some might call it discipline.
I had a chance to smart off to a teacher when I was in high school and was headed around. My mom had told me, well, there was two ways to handle it. I could smart off to her and feel good for 2 minutes, or I could talk to her at some length and give her the benefit of the doubt and explain to her and probably win the war you know, not necessarily this battle, but become a better person and become a friend with that teacher. And I ran out of my mom's room completely convinced that I was going to go over and rip that teacher from one end to the other. And by the time I got over there, I thought, you know, mom's really pretty smart and has some things that are worth saying. And I took my mom's tack on that instead of smarting off to that teacher. And that teacher became one of my biggest fans. Talked how great. Oh, man, this kid is so fantastic. And the whole time I'm thinking she's an idiot.
Yeah.
You know, but she became one of my biggest fans, and I really got to see how important it is sometimes to, you know, smarten off may not be your best. It feels really, really good at the moment. It's a lesson I've had to learn continuously. You know, in marriage, you know, smarting off my wife and saying something that feels really, really good for about 2 minutes. And then the next week of sleeping outside doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, it's you and I are pretty similar in some respects of how we can just come up with a really sarcastic comment.
Oh,
you know, you're talking about smarting off or not smarting off 20 of your teachers. You know, I basically, when I was in college, I basically had the exact opposite story of what you were saying. I had a teacher that she chose to make an example out of me one day in class because I wore jeans instead of shorts. And she goes, "You're going to sit out. You're taking a 0 for the day." And I'm like, "Well, I'm in college and I don't have to be here if I don't want to." So I just walked out of the class. And she goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I don't have to be here and you're making an example out of me." And then I just left anyways. But the thing that was the resolution of it was we had we had butt heads really hard that day. But she sent me an email and says, "Hey, I want you to come to my office." And so I went to her office and I was like, "Look, I'm sorry. I want to be the first one to apologize here. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done what I did." And she's like, "Well, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done what I did." And ultimately, because we were willing to sit there face to face in front of each other and explain where we were both at fault, we had a much better relationship than we did beforehand. Because I can remember she would tell me all the time, which she always called me John. My name's been John Mark since I was 0, but she would always call me John, you know, "John, I'm so proud of you. John, I'm so proud of you." And I mean, we were tight.
And I think that's a microcosm of a lesson for society today. Because two people don't agree doesn't mean they can't respect each other, doesn't mean they can't talk through the issues, whether it's black, white, gay, straight, left, right, you know,
I have a really good friend.
whatever.
I have a really good friend that owns a hardware store that loves to argue. I mean, absolutely loves to argue.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does. He loves it.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does. I've seen you do this many times, and I find it interesting that you're willing, and you're so willing to play the other side of the argument. Why do you do that?
You know, I had a roommate in college, and he and I are still incredible friends today. And we pretty much thought exactly alike on everything. But we would, when we turn off the lights in the dorm room at night, you know, neither one of us could go to sleep or whatever, we would decide to debate an issue. And, you know, we both agree on every issue of the day, but one of us would have to take the issue of the other side in order to have a good debate. And it became very interesting because we both wanted to debate the side we didn't agree with. And because you end up having to come up with all the reasons that you're wrong. And there are always good, valid reasons that your opinion on something is wrong. And if you can come up with those, you become way more sympathetic, way more understanding of those people who don't agree with you. And it just got ingrained into me that there are two sides. And growing up in journalism, you know, my dad taught me very early, there are two sides to every story. And it became very very much a part of my central character to when you come at me and you say such and such and such and such happened. So, well, let's look at from the other point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, it has been one of the things, it's one of my character traits.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might call it flaws. But I will tell you, it has caused me some issues. For instance, when your wife comes to you and says, so-and-so did this and mistreated me, or I didn't get customer service, or I didn't do this. And she's really looking for you to go jump in somebody's face, and you start arguing for that clerk, or you start arguing on the other side. It's not conducive to momentary happiness. Let's just call it that. And, you know, you have to kind of temper that, which is something I've tried to learn to do over the years, to know when people just really want to vent versus when people really need to be told, hey, there's another side to this. If you thought about this from their aspect. And I'll have people come up and tell me this political thing or that political thing. And I'll say, well, you know, here's something we can both agree on. And then I'll take the other side and try to couch it in such language that they can't really disagree with it. And at least maybe cause them to stop and think, maybe I don't need to hate the other side, because I'm not a big proponent of hating the other side.
Yeah.
I think it would be a lot better if we could all talk and get along, and it's fine to disagree. My wife, Susie, will tell you that I'm wrong 90% of the time, but we've somehow been able to figure out a way to get along over the years because each of us is entitled to an opinion.
Yeah.
I just have to understand that mine's wrong, and it's called marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think I just really enjoy that you do that. I'd never heard the story of how you picked up the skill of learning how to truly debate like that. But, you know, with my wife being in law school, I often hear her talk about, well, I have to be prepared for what the other side might say. Yeah, I have to know what's coming, you know. And so she does the same thing where she'll sit there and think through what the other side might have against her. The difference in our relationship and yours and your wife's is me and my wife are both, you know, type A personality drivers. So we don't necessarily debate these things.
Well, son, that will come with age. You'll learn to just agree that she's right.
I'm not saying I disagree with her being right. My wife is right 90% of the time, and I'm right 10% of the time.
Well, but, you know, one of the greatest things about law school, and it would probably be advantageous for nearly everybody to at least sit through some of the whole Socratic method and the really, in every lawsuit that has ever happened in the history of the world, there are two sides. And both sides are convinced they're right. Yeah. And a judge has to sit there and listen to both sides, and both of them have some merit. And that whole concept of, on the one hand, but on the other hand, is something that I would love to see more of us in society adopt, because it allows us to have some compassion for people we would otherwise not want to get along with. Yeah. What else you got? One of the things you asked me in the pre-interview where you were seeing if I was going to end up being a complete idiot, and shows you were wrong. I still am. No, you're not. One of the things you asked me was if I had any pieces of advice or whatever. And, yeah, let's get through that then. As I thought about that, my first deal was, you know, if you love what you do, then you don't ever have to work a day in your life. And that's kind of cliche-ish. Yeah. I don't think anybody ever loves all aspects of their job. I think everybody has parts of their job that they don't like. the more I thought about it, really what I taught both of my kids and what I have tried to do my whole life was you may not be the most talented. You may not have the most on the ball. You may not have had the most gifts, either through inheritance or abilities, but you can even the playing field in anything on earth by outworking your opponent.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I have tried to, if I can't throw a baseball as far as you, then I'm going to work on throwing a baseball 100 hours to where I can make it at least a good event. If I can't, whatever it is, if I'm not the best salesman on earth, I'm going to outwork you to learn what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I told both of my kids growing up, if you will show up on time and be there when you're supposed to and show up 10 minutes early, whatever it is, you will beat 50 to 75% of your competition just by showing up. And I think both of them have done that. I've always, you want me to work an hour, I'll give you an hour and 10 minutes. And I just think it's important to put more in than what's expected. And the consequence of that is other people will appreciate it. Not everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, when I offer them an hour, would rather me give them 30 minutes. But, that's life.
Yeah. The outwork your opponent. I've been around that philosophy for quite some time, as you know, with my coaching background and stuff. And that really does ring true in a lot of fields of life. If you're up at 5 a.m. and you're at practice at 5:30 and, you work for an hour and a half before school even starts, and then you practice again in the afternoon or, lift weights or whatever, eventually you will be better. You might not have started better, but you will be better. So I love that.
And I just think it's important to, whether it's working at your job, give it your all and 110%. And, I'm a pretty voracious reader and read everything Lou L'Amour he ever wrote. One of the common themes running through his books are you ride for the brand. If you're on my team, let's go together. Let's all go together. And point comes when you can't be on my team anymore. That's fine. We don't have to hate each other. Mm-hmm. But if you're gonna be on this team, let's ride for the brand. And that always meant a lot to me.
Oh, of course. It's all about the name on the front of your shirt.
That's right.
That's really what it is. So, well, Ken Turner, thank you so much for coming on the Daily People podcast.
You bet. John Mark Spear, I wish you the best success in this, and I hope it works out. And I hope you figure out a way to get some better guests.
I don't know, man. You're pretty good. Maybe I'll get lucky and have you on again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if you end up needing to scrape the bottom of the barrel, I'm always there.
Yeah. Well, hey, please forgive me for not knowing the Andy Griffith Show.
Hey,
if you can look over that, it would be much appreciated.
To me, that's not a failing on your part. I'll just have to talk to your parents about that.
Well, you do it. So, all right. Have a good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is your host, John Mark Spear. I wanted to take a moment to just say thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it. If you have any questions about it, you can reach out to me. My email is johnmarkspear0830@gmail.com.